speak of the family table, I do not merely speak of the bread and the salt, nor the steaming meal that rises with warmth into the air, but of something more ancient, something that has always been. The table is an altar, and around it gather not only the living, but the shadows of generations. Every seat, every empty chair carries with it a voice that whispers from the depths of the unconscious. It is here, in this mundane ritual of dining together, that the forgotten child within us awakens. This child, buried beneath layers of persona and adaptation, stirs when the clinking of cutlery and the cadence of voices bring back fragments of what was lost. And in this stirring, there is both promise and danger, for the child carries innocence but also pain, playfulness but also wounds that never healed. You may think that a family dinner is but an ordinary event, yet within the psyche, nothing is ordinary. Each gesture, each silence, each glance exchanged across the table is charged with psychic energy. When we sit among family, we are not merely adults with cultivated roles, but children once again. We return involuntarily to the primordial patterns, the archetypes of the mother, the father, the sibling, to the child that live beyond time and compel us to repeat, to enact, to relive. The unconscious is never absent from such gatherings. It is most alive there, and in the presence of those who knew us before we knew ourselves. The masks we wear in the world outside slip, however slightly, and what emerges is raw, unmediated, sometimes bewildering. Have you not noticed how easily an accomplished man reverts to a sulking child when his brother teases him, or how a mother's single look can reduce a grown daughter to a state of defensiveness or guilt? These are not accidents. They are eruptions of the forgotten child. The child within is both a symbol and a reality. It is the part of us that once looked upon the world with wonder, before the world pressed upon us with its demands, but it is also the part that suffered helplessly, unable to protect itself from the shadows cast by the adults around it. Thus, when family gathers, the child awakens not as a neutral figure, but as a complex with its web of associations, its joys and its traumas. At the dinner table, one may suddenly feel an inexplicable resentment, or a wave of tenderness, or a surge of shame that has no proportion to the moment. This is the unconscious speaking, telling us that the child within has been touched. In such moments, if we dare to listen, we are offered an initiation into self-knowledge. The forgotten child is often forgotten, not because it has vanished, but because we have exiled it. We have banished it to the underworld of the psyche in order to survive. The child may have carried unbearable feelings, rejection, neglect, humiliation that the adult could not integrate. So we send it away, but the psyche is whole. It never truly abandons any part of itself. Thus, the child waits, sometimes for decades, for the right constellation of circumstances to be recalled. And nothing recalls it more powerfully than the family ritual, for it was within this context that it was first wounded. When you return to the table, you return to the scene of your own becoming. You sit again before the archetypal father, who may once have seemed like a god, and before the mother, whose gaze could bless or destroy, and though your mind tells you that you are free, your soul knows that you are back in the theater where your earliest dramas unfolded. What does this mean for us? It means that family dinners are not trivial social customs, but portals to the unconscious. They bring us face to face with our shadow, the part of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge. The sibling who irritates you awakens in you the envy you have never confessed. The uncle who dominates the conversation embodies the tyrant you never dared to confront. The silence of the grandmother stirs in you the grief of what was never spoken. Each role at the table is a mirror, reflecting not only who they are, but who you are. And in this hall of mirrors, the forgotten child appears again, sometimes joyful, sometimes wounded, always asking, "Will you finally see me?" The archetype of the child is not merely personal, it is collective. Across myths and religions, the divine child appears as symbol of renewal, of new life, of hope that transcends despair. Yet this child is also fragile, vulnerable to the forces that would seek to annihilate it. In our own lives, the forgotten child is precisely this, the potential for renewal that remains hidden within our wounds. When you sit at the table and feel the old wound reopen, do not turn away. Do not rush to defend yourself with sarcasm, or to numb yourself with wine, or to withdraw into silence. Instead, look at what has been stirred. The pain is not merely regression, it is the path to integration. By acknowledging the child, you retrieve the lost treasure buried in your own depths. Consider the dream that so often visits those who wrestle with family. A man dreams he is back in his childhood home, sitting at the table, but the food before him is spoiled, inedible. He wakes with disgust and confusion. Yet, what is a dream saying? It is saying that the nourishment offered in childhood was corrupted, not necessarily in physical food, but in the emotional sustenance of love, recognition, and security. The inner child still sits at that table, still staring at the spoiled meal, still waiting for someone to offer what was never given. This dream is not mere memory. It is the unconscious presenting in symbolic form the truth of a psychic wound, and it is precisely by interpreting such dreams that we begin to heal. We cannot change the past, but we can change our relation to it. By feeding the forgotten child within us now with compassion, with acknowledgement, with truth, we redeem what was lost. There is also another kind of dream, one in which the dreamer finds themselves at a vast banquet, surrounded not by their family of origin, but by strangers, or mythical figures, or even animals. Here the child is not abandoned, but celebrated, welcomed into a greater communion. Such a dream indicates that the individual is beginning to find a new psychic family, an inner community of archetypes and energies that can nourish the soul beyond the limitations of the biological clan. This is the promise of individuation, that one is not forever bound by the failures of the past, but can discover within the collective unconscious a source of renewal that transcends personal history. The forgotten child, once fed at this archetypal table, becomes not merely a wound, but a guide leading us toward wholeness. But let us not be naive. To awaken the forgotten child, is also to awaken the rage, the grief, the unmet needs that lie buried. This is why so many avoid family dinners or dread the holidays when they are obliged to return home. They know, even if unconsciously, that these gatherings stir too much, and yet avoidance is not liberation. It is only by facing these emotions, by allowing the child to speak, that we can be free. The path of individuation is not the path of escape, but of descent into the underworld of the psyche, into the forgotten places where the child still waits. There, in the darkness, we find the very life force that has been withheld from us. By integrating it, we become more whole. You may ask, then how do we engage with this awakening at the family table? The answer is not simple, for each psyche is unique, but it begins with awareness. Notice what arises in you as you sit with family. Notice the bodily sensations, the sudden waves of emotion, the memories that surface unbidden. These are messages from the child. Do not dismiss them. Do not say, that was long ago. In the unconscious, time does not exist as we know it. The child is still present, still experiencing, still waiting. By listening, you begin to honor what was once silenced, and in honoring, you create the possibility of transformation. The transformation is not only personal, but also collective. When one person dares to acknowledge the forgotten child, the entire family constellation shifts. The scapegoat may be released from their role. The golden child may be freed from the burden of perfection. The silent one may finally speak. Thus, by engaging our own inner child, we contribute to the healing of the ancestral field. We are not isolated beings, but threads in a tapestry woven across generations. The wounds we carry are not only ours, they are the continuation of wounds that stretch back to grandparents, to great-grandparents, to ancestors whose names we may never know. And so, when the child awakens at the table, it may be carrying not only your pain, but the unprocessed grief of those who came before you. To integrate it is to redeem them as well. The family table, then, is not just a site of personal memory, but of ancestral reckoning. The stories told, the jokes repeated, the rituals performed. These are all ways the unconscious seeks to bind the living to the dead. But when you bring awareness, you introduce something new. You no longer merely repeat, you transform. The forgotten child becomes the conscious child, the bearer of renewal. And in this act, you fulfill one of the deepest callings of the human soul, to carry the unconscious into consciousness, to make what was hidden known, to bring light into shadow. When we enter into these gatherings, something subtle but powerful takes place in the psychic atmosphere. The family meal is not only a repetition of old patterns, but also a reenactment of the mythic banquet where gods and mortals sit together and destinies are decided. In Greek mythology, we see the banquet of the gods at Olympus, a place where feasts are never simply about food, but about power, betrayal, and eternal bonds. In Norse myth, we find Valhalla, where heroes dine and drink endlessly in the presence of Odin. These mythic images are not separate from us. They are archetypal energies that inform even our simplest human rituals. And so, when you sit with your family, do not be deceived by the ordinariness of the soup or the bread. You are participating in a drama as old as time, and the forgotten child within you is both audience and actor in this eternal play. The child does not awaken with gentle innocence alone. Often it awakens with protest, with anger, with a refusal to remain silent any longer. You may find yourself irritable at the very sound of your father's chewing, or wounded by your sister's casual dismissal of your opinion. These reactions are not mere petty grievances. They are signals from the depths. They tell you that something unresolved is present. The forgotten child awakens precisely where you feel most disproportionate in your reaction. If a remark that should be trivial burns in your chest for hours, it is the child who is speaking. The soul cannot bear falsehood forever. Eventually, what has been repressed insists on being heard, even if only in the small theater of the dinner table. But let us not reduce this awakening to pathology alone. The forgotten child also carries with it the possibility of wonder, play, and renewal. Sometimes, in the midst of tension, there erupts laughter that is genuine, uncontrollable, and healing. The child delights in the shared joke, the silly story from the past, the memory of a time when all felt safe, if only for a fleeting moment. In such laughter, the soul reminds us that wholeness is not only found in sorrow, but also in joy. The forgotten child, when welcomed, does not remain only the wounded one. It becomes also the divine child, the one who brings new life into the midst of what has grown stale. Thus, family dinners contain both poison and medicine, and the difference lies in whether we recognize the child or reject it once more. The work of individuation demands that we encounter this child consciously. To do so requires courage, for the child's pain is raw, and the adult within us often prefers control, yet control at the table is illusory. The unconscious slips through in body language, in tone of voice, in accidental words spoken. A family dinner can undo years of carefully constructed persona in a single moment. This undoing, painful as it is also a gift, for the persona, though necessary, is a mask that obscures as much as it protects. When it cracks, the deeper truth of the psyche emerges to integrate the forgotten child. We must allow the mask to crack. We must be willing to appear vulnerable, even foolish. For in such vulnerability lies authenticity. Dreams again offer us images that illuminate this process. I once heard a dream of a woman who found herself at a dinner where all the chairs were too large for her, and she struggled to climb onto them, feeling like a child once again. The dream revealed the persistence of her inner child, overshadowed by figures she experienced as overwhelming in waking life. She was successful, confident, even admired. But at the family table, she shrank into this small, struggling figure. To see this image consciously allowed her to realize that her adult accomplishments had never truly addressed the wound of insignificance she carried from childhood. The dream gave her the key to recognize that the forgotten child's voice still determined her sense of self at the deepest level, only by integrating that child, by honoring its feelings, could she reclaim her full stature. There is also the matter of projection. Family dinners are fertile grounds for projections, because here we face those who first served as screens for our unconscious. The mother becomes the carrier of your anima, the father the carrier of your animus, siblings, the mirrors of your shadow. Thus, you may find yourself irrationally hostile toward a brother, not realizing that he embodies for you the rejected qualities of your own soul. Or you may idolize a sister, seeing in her the vitality you have lost in yourself. These projections are not errors. They are opportunities, for projection is the psyche's way of revealing what we cannot yet see within. To withdraw projection is to reclaim our own energy, to see the sibling not as enemy or savior, but as a person, while also recognizing in ourselves the shadow or light we once denied. The child archetype is intimately linked with the future. It represents not only what was lost, but what is yet to be. This is why dreams of children so often accompany transitions in life. The forgotten child at the family table is also the future self, waiting to be born. It asks, will you remain trapped in repetition, or will you allow me to guide you into new becoming? To embrace the child is to embrace the possibility of change. To reject it is to remain bound in the cycles of the past. This is why individuation cannot proceed without engagement with the child archetype, for only by making peace with the child within can we step into the maturity of true adulthood. Yet maturity, in the Jungian sense, is not the repression of the child, but its integration. It is to carry the child with you, not as a burden, but as a source of vitality. Imagine the artist who paints not from skill alone, but from the playful curiosity of the child within. Imagine the scientist who asks questions with the wonder of a child staring at the stars. Imagine the lover who embraces not with calculation, but with the open heart of the child. In each of these, the child is alive, not forgotten. And it is precisely at the family dinner, when the child is most painfully reawakened, that we find the doorway into this integration, for the child cries out to be seen. And in seeing it, we are renewed. But the path is long and not without resistance. Families themselves are unconscious systems, organized to maintain stability, even at the cost of truth. The role you played as child scapegoat, hero, peacemaker, invisible one tends to persist into adulthood. When you return to the family table, you often feel compelled to step back into this role, even if it no longer serves you. This compulsion is the family's way of protecting itself from change, but individuation demands that you resist. To refuse the old role is to risk conflict, but it is also to open the possibility of transformation. The forgotten child within you will never be integrated if you continue to enact the role that once silenced it. To stand in your truth, even when the family resists, is to honor the child at last. The shadow looms large in all of this, for the child often carries the family's collective shadow. What could not be spoken, what could not be acknowledged, was often laid upon the child. Thus, when you awaken the forgotten child, when you awaken not only your personal wounds, but also the shadow of the entire family system, This is why the work feels so overwhelming. You're not only carrying your own pain, you are carrying the unlived lives of your parents, the unspoken grief of your ancestors. But here too lies the possibility of redemption, for to integrate the child is to redeem not only yourself but also those who came before. You become the vessel through which the ancestral shadow is brought into light. So the next time you sit at the family table, I invite you to look beyond the surface. Do not see only the food, the small talk, the rituals. See the altar upon which the unconscious is offering you a chance for healing. Listen to the voice within you that trembles, that protests, that laughs. That voice is the forgotten child. It has waited a long time. If you dare to meet it, you may find that the family dinner is not merely a social obligation, but a sacred initiation into the deepest mysteries of your own soul. There is a paradox at the heart of the family table. It is both a sanctuary and a battlefield. It is the place where life is sustained, where nourishment is shared, where the archetype of community is enacted. Yet it is also the place where old conflicts rise like specters, where words cut deeper than knives, where silence can be more suffocating than any noise. This paradox reflects the psyche itself, which contains both the longing for wholeness and the inevitability of division. The forgotten child awakens in this paradox, pulled toward both love and pain, remembering both delight and abandonment. And in this tension lies the very essence of individuation, the task of reconciling opposites, of holding together what seems irreconcilable. Think of the myths of banquets that end in chaos. In the story of Eris, the goddess of discord, she throws a golden apple into the feast of the gods. Inscribed to the fairest, what begins as celebration becomes rivalry, jealousy, and war. This is not far from the psychic truths of our family gatherings. The forgotten child within us is often the golden apple, small but capable of igniting conflict that spreads far beyond itself. For when the child awakens, it disrupts the fragile balance of roles, the agreements made unconsciously to keep peace. Suddenly, jealousy emerges, or old resentments rise, and what seemed like harmony is shattered. Yet this too is necessary, for without discord there is no growth. Without the apple, the gods remain stagnant. Without the child, we remain prisoners of a false peace. The forgotten child is also the one who remembers what we try to forget. Families are experts at repression, at hiding what is too painful to speak. Secrets are buried beneath polite conversation. Traumas disguised as jokes. Silence is heavy with what everyone knows, but no one says. The child within us does not forget. It carries the memory of those moments when truth was denied. And so, when it awakens at the table, it brings these memories with it. Perhaps you feel a sudden unease when your father tells a story, or a wave of sadness when your mother smiles too brightly. These are not irrational feelings. They are the child reminding you of the shadow beneath the family myth. To honor the child is to honor this memory, even when others would prefer to keep it hidden. Dreams often dramatize this dynamic. A man dreams of sitting at a banquet where everyone eats except him. He watches them feast, but his plate remains empty. In waking life, he describes a childhood of being overlooked, of feeling invisible in his family. The dream is the child's protest, a refusal to accept invisibility any longer. To listen to the dream is to hear the child crying. To deserve to be fed. Such dreams are painful, but they are also liberating, for they reveal the truth we must face in order to be whole. Without the awakening of the forgotten child, we continue to live in denial, participating in the feast without ever tasting nourishment. The process of individuation requires us to descend into this chaos, to sit again at the table, not as the compliant child, but as the conscious adult who can face the ghosts. This descent is not easy. It feels like regression, as if we are being pulled backward into the very patterns we sought to escape. Yet regression is often the precondition of transformation. In alchemy, the prima materia, the raw material that must be transformed, is often described as dark, chaotic, even poisonous. It must be endured, dissolved, and purified before the gold can be found. The forgotten child is such prima materia. It is raw, painful, chaotic, but it is also the material from which wholeness can be forged. To face it is to enter the alchemical process of the soul. Consider the archetype of the wounded healer, embodied in the figure of Chiron. Chiron was wounded by a poisoned arrow that could never be healed, and yet he became the greatest healer of all. So too, the forgotten child within us carries wounds that may never fully disappear. But it is precisely these wounds that make us capable of healing, of compassion, of depth. The family dinner awakens not only our wounds, but also our potential to become healers for ourselves, for our families, for the collective. When you feel the pain of the child at the table, you are being initiated into this archetype. You are being asked, will you turn away? Or will you allow your wound to become a source of wisdom? Yet wisdom does not come by idealizing the child. We must resist the temptation to see the inner child only as pure, innocent, untainted. The child also carries the shadow. It can be selfish, demanding, manipulative. This quality too must be integrated. To embrace the child is not to romanticize it, but to accept it in its wholeness. The forgotten child is not an angel, but a human figure, filled with contradictions. To love it is to love yourself as you are, not as you imagine you should be. And this is perhaps the hardest task of all, for it requires humility, patience, and a willingness to face our own imperfection. The family dinner is a stage upon which these truths are enacted. You may find yourself arguing over something trivial: who sits where, who was late, who forgot a detail of the story. But beneath the trivial lies the archetypal. These arguments are never about what they seem. They are about recognition, about belonging, about love withheld or given conditionally. The child within you reacts not to the content, but to the archetypal drama beneath it. To see this is to begin to interpret your life symbolically, to recognize that every event, however small, is also a message from the unconscious. In this way, the family dinner becomes a text to be read, a dream enacted in waking life, offering you endless material for your individuation. If you can approach the table with this symbolic attitude, you transform the experience. Instead of being trapped in the roles and resentments, you begin to see the play of archetypes, the patterns of projection, the voice of the child. This does not make the pain disappear, but it gives it meaning. And meaning is the soul's deepest nourishment. Without meaning, pain is unbearable. With meaning, even suffering can be transformed into growth. Thus, the forgotten child awakens, not to torment you, but to lead you toward meaning. It is the messenger of the soul, asking you to interpret the symbols of your life, to see the sacred in the ordinary. At times, this awakening can feel overwhelming. You may feel flooded with memories, emotions, sensations that threaten to drown you. In such moments, it is crucial to remember that you are not alone. The child is not separate from the greater self. The archetype of wholeness that guides individuation. To face the child is also to invoke the presence of the self, which holds and contains what feels unbearable. The self is like the great parent, beyond your personal parents, who can offer the unconditional acceptance that was lacking. In the deepest sense, the family dinner awakens not only the forgotten child, but also the forgotten self. It brings you into contact with the divine within, hidden beneath the personal drama. And in this contact, healing begins. Do not be surprised. Then, if you leave such gatherings both exhausted and strangely illuminated, the psychic energy stirred at the family table is immense. It drains, but it also reveals. You may need solitude afterward to digest not only the food, but the psychic material. This digestion is part of the work. It is how the raw experience becomes integrated, how the forgotten child's voice becomes part of your conscious narrative. Without this digestion, you remain overwhelmed. With it, you grow. The child does not disappear, but it ceases to dominate from the shadows. It becomes part of your conscious self, contributing vitality rather than chaos. And so, when I say that family dinners awaken the forgotten inner child, I do not mean only that they bring discomfort. I mean that they bring opportunity. They are initiations disguised as routines. They are thresholds where the personal and the archetypal meet. They are places where you can begin to see the truth of your soul. If only you are willing to look. The table is a mirror. The family is a dream. The child is a guide. To sit at the table with awareness is to participate consciously in the great work of individuation. The awakening of the forgotten child at the family table confronts us with the essential task of life, to integrate what has been split, to reconcile what has been opposed, to bring into wholeness what was fragmented. This child is not merely a psychological construct. It is an archetypal reality that bridges the temporal with the eternal. Each time we return to the table, each time the memories surge, each time we feel ourselves pulled back into a younger self, we are being asked a question by the soul. Will you recognize me? Will you claim me as your own? Or will you exile me again, leaving me to wander in the shadows of your unconscious? It is easy to look away, to numb ourselves, to retreat into the adult persona that says, I am beyond that now, but individuation demands honesty. The forgotten child is not gone. It lives in your dreams, in your outbursts, in your longings. It lives in your relationships, in the way you love or cannot love, in the way you trust or cannot trust. It shapes your destiny, whether you acknowledge it or not. And so, the family table, uncomfortable as it may be, is one of the most powerful mirrors you will ever encounter. It shows you not only who you are, but who you were, and who you might yet become if you dare to integrate. Do you see how the smallest gestures carry immense weight? The way your father passes you the bread without looking at you may awaken in you the ache of invisibility. The way your mother corrects your story may ignite a fury that feels older than words. The way your sibling interrupts may bring back the helplessness of childhood. These are not just irritations. They are psychic messages. They reveal the complexes that still live within you, the patterns that still bind you. And if you have the courage to attend to them, you can begin the slow, sacred work of transformation. You can begin to take back what you projected, to retrieve what you lost, to embrace what you rejected. In this way, the family table becomes an alchemical vessel, and the forgotten child becomes the prima materia of your inner gold. You must understand that this child is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. It is the bridge to the self, to the wholeness that encompasses both light and shadow. When you feel the ache of the child, you are touching the archetypal wound of humanity, the place where we all long to be seen, to be loved, to be accepted without condition. This longing is universal, and yet it manifests in each of us in deeply personal ways. To embrace the child within is to embrace the common humanity we share, to recognize that beneath the masks and defenses, we are all still seeking the same nourishment. In this recognition, compassion is born not only for yourself but for others, even for those who once wounded you. Imagine for a moment a family dinner where each person is aware of their inner child, where each listens not only to words but to the silences, to the glances, to the emotions that arise. Such a dinner would be transformed. Conflict would not vanish, but it would become conscious, meaningful, capable of leading to growth rather than endless repetition. This is what happens when individuation touches the collective. The family itself begins to heal. For as one member becomes conscious, the whole system shifts. The forgotten child in you calls forth the forgotten child in others. And together you begin to create a new pattern, a new story. But do not be deceived, this is not easy. It is tempting to remain in the old patterns, to play the roles assigned long ago. They feel safe, familiar, even if they are suffocating. To step out of them is to risk rejection, to risk being misunderstood, to risk conflict. Yet individuation always requires risk. To live authentically is to risk the disapproval of those who prefer you to remain who you once were. But what is the alternative? To remain split, to remain divided, to live without wholeness. The child will not allow this forever. It will continue to appear in dreams, in symptoms, in sudden eruptions at the dinner table until you listen. The psyche is relentless in its pursuit of wholeness. And so I tell you, do not despise the family dinner. Do not see it as mere burden, as mere obligation. See it as initiation. See it as the place where the unconscious reveals itself most clearly. See it as the sacred theater where the drama of your soul is enacted. Yes, it is painful. Yes, it is messy, but it is also holy. For in that mess, in that pain, lies the very material of your transformation. The forgotten child is not your enemy. It is your guide. It is the part of you that refuses to settle for half a life, that insists on being whole. Perhaps you will ask, what then am I to do when I sit again at that table? My answer is simple, though not easy. Be conscious. Notice, listen, allow the feelings to arise, but do not be consumed by them. See the archetypes at play, see the projections, see the child, and then, afterward, reflect, journal your experience, explore your dreams, bring what was unconscious into consciousness. This is the work. It is not glamorous. It is not dramatic. It is slow, patient, often hidden from others, but it is the path of individuation, and there is no other. In time, you may find that the family table changes, not because others change, but because you do the same gestures, the same words, the same silences no longer wound you in the same way. You see them for what they are, the expressions of others' own forgotten children, their own shadows, their own wounds. And with this awareness comes compassion, even forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, nor does it mean condoning. It means releasing yourself from the endless repetition of pain. It means seeing others not as gods who defined your fate, but as humans caught in their own struggles. It means reclaiming your own soul from the power you once gave them. And in this reclamation, you are free. The child within you does not vanish when integrated. It remains, but as ally rather than saboteur. It brings you vitality, creativity, play. It keeps you from becoming too rigid, too controlled, too identified with a mask. It reminds you of wonder, of spontaneity, of the joy of simply being. This is the gift of the child archetype. It keeps life alive. When forgotten, it haunts you. When remembered, it blesses you. And so, the family dinner, uncomfortable as it may be, is one of the most potent rituals of remembrance you will ever know. Let me leave you with this. The table is round. Even if it appears rectangular, around it sit not only your family, but the archetypes, the ancestors, the forgotten parts of your own soul. Ach bitte, each word, each silence is a sacrament. The child within you waits, not with accusation, but with hope. Will you see me? Will you hear me? Will you bring me home? This is the question that echoes at every family dinner. And to answer yes is to step into the fullness of your humanity, to embrace the wholeness that is your birthright, to live not as a mask but as a soul. So the next time you sit at that table, remember you are not merely eating, You are participating in a mystery. You are entering into an ancient drama. You are awakening the forgotten child. And in doing so, you are awakening yourself. Do not turn away. Do not fall back into sleep. Stay awake, for the child has been waiting a very long time. And when you finally meet it, face to face, you will know that you have not only remembered who you were, but discovered who you are and who you might yet become